He almost walked out of the restaurant before the truth could stop him. Sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows of the small downtown café, painting golden rectangles across the wooden floor. The lunchtime crowd hummed softly, clinking cups, low laughter, the hiss of steaming milk, but to Arman Qureshi, the noise felt distant, like he was underwater. His palms were damp, his heart beat heavy in his chest. It had been 4 years since he'd sat across from someone who wasn't a client, a coworker, or his 8-year-old daughter. And now, the one time he finally gathered the courage to try again, he was certain it had already gone wrong. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whisper Tales 3. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Arman spotted her immediately. Farah Malik from accounting, quiet, sharp, always professionally dressed, was seated at the table by the window. The very table he had reserved under his name. She was checking her phone, occasionally glancing toward the door. His stomach dropped. Of all the days, of all the places, why here? He felt irritation rise before reason could catch it. Maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe she didn't see the reserved sign. Maybe this whole day was cursed from the start. He adjusted his watch and walked toward her, rehearsing a polite way to ask if she'd taken the wrong seat. His mind was already bracing for awkward small talk later, if they ran into each other again at work. Dating was hard enough as a single father. Dating where your colleagues could witness your humiliation? Even worse. 4 years earlier, his wife Sana had passed away suddenly after a brief illness. The world had collapsed overnight. Arman had been left with hospital bills, sleepless nights, and a little girl named Meher who refused to sleep unless she held his hand. He had learned to braid hair through online tutorials, to pack lunches shaped like stars, to smile at parent-teacher meetings even when grief pressed against his ribs like a weight. He had rebuilt himself brick by brick, not because he was strong, but because Meher needed him to be. Love had felt like a closed chapter. Until one evening, while staying late to finish reports, Farah had brought him tea without saying much. She had simply placed the cup beside him and offered a tired smile. In the months that followed, their conversations had grown from work memos to quiet confessions about life's disappointments. She spoke about caring for her aging mother. He spoke, cautiously, about Meher. Something gentle had begun to form between them. But when Arman finally decided to try, really try, he had done it the old-fashioned way. A simple message. Lunch on Saturday. Neutral ground. No pressure. Now she was sitting at his table. He reached it and cleared his throat, preparing to explain the mix-up, when she looked up. Her eyes widened, not in confusion, but in recognition. And then, something softer. Almost shy. That was the moment it hit him. She wasn't at the wrong table. She was waiting for him. The realization rushed through him so suddenly that it stole the air from his lungs. The irritation melted into embarrassment, then into something warmer, fragile and terrifying at the same time. He had been so convinced that life would trip him before he could take a single step forward that he hadn't even considered the simplest truth. She stood up, smoothing her light blue scarf, sunlight catching the strands of her hair. In daylight, away from office cubicles and fluorescent lighting, she looked different, lighter, almost hopeful. And for the first time, Arman saw not just a coworker, but a woman who had also chosen to show up despite her fears. They sat. At first, it was stiff. He fumbled with the menu though he already knew what he would order. She traced the rim of her glass absent-mindedly. Around them, the world continued, waiters weaving between tables, children laughing near the entrance, the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air. It was ordinary. Completely ordinary. And yet, for Arman, it felt monumental. He told her about Meher's recent school art competition. How she had drawn their little apartment with a giant sun in the corner. How she insisted that the sun was her mother watching over them. His voice wavered when he said it, and he hated that it still did. Grief, he had learned, never truly leaves. It simply becomes quieter. Farah listened without trying to fix anything. She didn't offer clichés or forced optimism. She simply listened. When she spoke, she shared her own loneliness, not dramatic, not tragic, but real. The exhaustion of being the responsible one. The fear that time was moving forward while she stood still. The awkwardness began to dissolve. In its place grew something steadier. They laughed about office mishaps. They argued lightly about whether tea was superior to coffee. Outside, the afternoon sun shifted, casting longer shadows across their table. But halfway through the meal, doubt crept back into Arman's mind. Could he really do this? Could he risk bringing someone into Meher's life? What if it ended in heartbreak? What if he wasn't ready? He had built such careful routines, safe, predictable, manageable. Love threatened to disrupt all of it. He looked at Farah, who was watching a little boy at another table trying to feed crumbs to a sparrow near the window. There was a softness in her gaze that didn't feel forced. It felt natural. For the first time in years, Arman allowed himself to imagine something beyond survival. Not replacing what he had lost. Never that. But adding something new. When the bill arrived, neither of them rushed to leave. The café had grown quieter, the lunchtime rush fading into a calm afternoon lull. Sunlight now bathed the entire room in warm amber tones. It was still day, still ordinary, but inside him, something had shifted. Walking out together, side by side, he felt the weight on his chest lighten just a little. Not gone. But lighter. He realized then that the biggest mistake hadn't been thinking she took the wrong table. It had been believing that he didn't deserve to sit there at all. Life had already taken so much from him. But maybe it wasn't done giving. Near the corner of the street, they paused. The city buzzed around them, cars passing, vendors calling out, the sky wide and open above. He thought about Meher's drawing of the apartment with the giant sun. Maybe healing wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about letting the light in again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your support helps stories of hope reach the people who need them most. And before we end, I have a special request. Comment, second chances exist, if you believe that even after loss, life can still surprise us with something beautiful. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it simply sits at your table, waiting patiently, until you realize it was meant for you all along.